This track had everything Formula One wants: a billion-person market, a modern circuit drivers actually enjoyed, and a sold-out debut race. So how did it go from the future of F1 in Asia to completely erased from the calendar in just 3 seasons? The real reason has nothing to do with racing, and everything to do with money, politics, and one brutal miscalculation. On paper, the Indian Grand Prix wasn't a gamble. It was a certainty. Formula One had been chasing India for years. A country of over 1 billion people, a booming tech economy, and a growing obsession with motorsport engineering. Bernie Ecclestone didn't see India as a risk. He called it the next China. And unlike many new F1 venues, this wasn't a temporary street race thrown together for television. India built a $400 million permanent Formula One circuit from the ground up. The Buddh International Circuit. 5 kilometers long, huge elevation changes, one of the longest full-throttle sections in the sport. Drivers described it as a mix of Spa, Suzuka, and Monza. High-speed commitment, technical rhythm, and zero room for mistakes. Even Herman Tilke, a name usually met with skepticism, got this one right. And when the cars finally hit the track in 2011, the verdict was clear. The racing worked, the circuit delivered. And for a brief moment, it looked like Formula One had found its next long-term home. When Formula One arrived in India in 2011, it didn't feel like an experiment. It felt like an arrival. Nearly 100,000 fans showed up across the weekend, packing grandstands that were never supposed to fill on year one. International broadcasters leaned into the spectacle, blending Formula One's hyper-modern image with India's culture, scale, and intensity. For Formula One, this was the dream scenario. A new market that didn't just show curiosity, it showed up. On track, the racing delivered exactly what the circuit promised. High-speed commitment into turn 1. Cars flat out for over 15 seconds down the main straight. And despite Red Bull's dominance at the time, the race wasn't a procession. There were collisions, mistakes, chaos, the kind of moments new fans remember. Even the imperfections worked in its favor. A stray dog interrupting practice became a viral moment instead of a scandal. For one weekend, Formula One in India looked inevitable. And that's what makes what happened next so hard to explain. Almost immediately, the cracks began to show. Not in the racing, that part worked, but everywhere else. In the days leading up to the first Grand Prix, large sections of the circuit complex were still under construction. Power cuts weren't rare. Some buildings weren't fully operational. And in a few areas, safety checks were happening uncomfortably late. Teams arrived early, as they always do, and ran straight into bureaucracy. Cars, spare parts, even basic equipment were held up in customs for hours, sometimes days. Everything needed paperwork. Everything needed approval. For a sport built on military-level logistics, it was chaos. Some team personnel reportedly landed in India with barely enough time to make first practice. Not because of delays in the air, but delays on the ground. None of this made headlines. None of it affected the broadcast, and that's why it was ignored. As long as the race went ahead and the grandstands looked full, Formula One convinced itself these were temporary problems, not structural ones. Even in its first year, the Indian Grand Prix was expensive in a way most fans never saw. Hosting Formula One isn't just about building a circuit, it's about paying Formula One to show up. India was locked into a hosting fee reported to be over $30 million per year, before security, logistics, staffing, or infrastructure costs were even counted. And unlike many other races on the calendar, there was no government safety net, no subsidies, no quiet financial backstopping. The entire burden sat on the organizers. At the same time, ticket prices were already high by local standards, not because demand was strong, but because costs were. From the outside, the debut still looked like a success, but internally, the margins were razor thin. Formula One hadn't just arrived in India. It had arrived carrying a bill the event could barely afford. By 2012, the warning signs weren't subtle anymore. Attendance dropped from 95,000 to just 65,000. That's not a dip. That's a collapse. And it wasn't because the racing got worse. Sebastian Vettel dominated again, but the track itself was still brilliant. The problem was everything around it. Ticket prices remained too high for the average Indian fan. Public transport to the circuit was a nightmare. And the novelty factor that filled seats in year one? Gone. Bernie Ecclestone tried to stay optimistic, calling India the new China for Formula One. But even he had to know the math wasn't working. Behind the scenes, the cracks were becoming canyons. The organizers were hemorrhaging money, losing an estimated $35 million per year. And still, no government support arrived. Formula One kept showing up. The bills kept piling up. And the crowds kept shrinking. When Formula One returned to India in 2013, most people assumed it was just another race. It wasn't. It was a funeral. Attendance dropped again, this time to just 60,000, barely half capacity. Sebastian Vettel won again. Pole position, fastest lap, dominant race. For most fans, the highlight wasn't even the racing. It was this moment, reference to iconic moment from the document. But the real story was happening in the background. The organizers were drowning in debt. Over $11.7 billion by some estimates. The hosting fees alone were $31 million per year. The circuit cost $400 million to build, and there was no financial lifeline coming. After the race, the announcement came quietly. The Indian Grand Prix would take a sabbatical in 2014. It never came back. So what actually killed the Indian Grand Prix? It wasn't the racing, it wasn't the circuit, and it wasn't even just the money. It was taxes. The Indian government classified Formula One as entertainment, not sport. That meant the event was hit with massive entertainment taxes that made ticket prices astronomically high for local fans. But it got worse. The government also argued that Formula One had a permanent establishment in India because teams arrived weeks in advance. That meant all Indian-sourced income was subject to Indian corporate tax. Formula One wasn't just expensive to host, it was being taxed into oblivion. And then there were the customs and visa nightmares. Every car, every piece of equipment, even team laptops had to go through extensive customs checks. Teams were delayed for hours, sometimes days. Personnel arrived with barely enough time to make first practice, not because of flight delays, but because of bureaucratic red tape. For a sport built on precision logistics, it was chaos. And unlike other struggling races on the calendar, there was no government bailout, no subsidies, no financial support, no political will to fix the problems. The organizers were left to carry the entire financial burden alone, and it crushed them. Today, the Buddh International Circuit sits largely abandoned. It's held a handful of races over the past 12 years. It's no longer an FIA Grade 1 circuit. And when MotoGP tried to race there in 2023, they ran into the exact same problems Formula One did. The track is still there, the infrastructure is still there, but the dream is gone. Liberty Media bought Formula One from Bernie Ecclestone in 2017 and inherited the Indian tax mess with it. They eventually resolved some of the issues, but the damage was done. India isn't on the calendar, and it doesn't look like it's coming back. Here's the honest truth. The Indian Grand Prix should return. The circuit is brilliant, drivers loved it. India's F1 fan base has grown 30% in the last 5 years. There are 2 Indian drivers in Formula 2 right now, and sim racing is exploding in popularity across the country. The market is there. But for it to work, 3 things need to happen. 1. The Indian government needs to reclassify Formula One as sport, not entertainment. That would slash taxes and make tickets affordable for local fans. 2. They need to pay the hosting fees and provide financial support. No private organizer can shoulder this burden alone. 3. Fix the customs and logistics nightmare. Formula One can't function if teams are stuck at the border. If those 3 things happen, the grandstands would be packed, the racing would be incredible, and India would have a permanent place on the Formula One calendar. But until the government decides Formula One is worth supporting, the Buddh International Circuit will remain a ghost, a reminder of what could have been and what still could be, if anyone cared enough to make it happen. The Indian Grand Prix wasn't abandoned because it failed. It was abandoned because it was never given a real chance to succeed, and that's the story no one talks about. Now check this next video, which is More Than Speed.